Hi guys, today we're going to talk about histograms. And we're going to be focusing on the I can statement, I can create dot plots, histograms, and box plots from data. And obviously today we're going to be focusing on histograms. Let's look at some graphs we already know very well. This is a bar graph. A bar graph can be used to display and compare data. The scale of a bar graph should include all the data values and be easily divided into equal intervals. So, as you can see, the scale in this bar graph is 200 million. That means that every line jumps 200 million. Bar graphs are also useful for comparing categories. So if my data doesn't come in numbers, I can use a bar graph to compare them. In this bar graph, I'm not comparing numbers, I'm comparing the most widely spoken languages. So English is not a number, neither is Hindi, Mandarin, or Spanish. Therefore, a bar graph is appropriate to display this data. Let's use this bar graph to answer some questions. The first question, which fruit was eaten the most? Well, this is a very simple question to answer. I just look for the bar that is the highest, because the frequency of that fruit would appear the most. And in this case, the bar for bananas is the longest, so bananas were eaten the most. I can also use bar graphs to answer questions like this, about how many more pounds of apples than pounds of grapes were eaten per person. Well, to do this, I look at the apples bar and the grapes bar, and I find their frequency, then I subtract them. And I'd find that about 10 pounds more apples were eaten than grapes per person. You can use a double bar graph to compare two related sets of data. So let's look at this data. We've got two classes, Class A and Class B, and they were asked which pets they owned. Dogs, cats, and birds are the three data items or categories that they collected data on. You can see there are two bars for dogs, cats, and birds. Now, what does this mean? Well, with a double bar graph, we need to have a key. So we need to know what the green bar stands for and what the orange bar stands for. In this case, the green bar stands for Class A and the orange bar stands for Class B. I can answer similar questions using a double bar graph than I did using a regular bar graph. For example, I can tell which class has more dogs. Well, I would look at the dog data, and I would look at the two bars, and the orange bar is taller than the green bar, therefore I know that Class B has more dogs than Class A. I can also use this double bar graph to make general statements. What pet is owned most by students in Class A or Class B? Again, this answer is dogs, because in both cases, the green and the orange bar are the highest. So if I added them together, the green and orange bar for dogs, cats, and birds, the most would be dog. A histogram is a bar graph that shows the frequency of data in equal intervals, and that is the most important thing to remember when making a histogram. It is also important to note that there is no space between the bars in a histogram. Let's look at how to make one. This table shows the number of hours students watch TV in 1 week. We're going to make a histogram of this data. We talked a lot about frequency tables in previous lessons, and so we already know how to create those. And today we're going to use that to make a histogram. We're going to take this frequency table and create another frequency table using intervals. So, here I'm going to have the same data, number of hours of TV, and its frequency. But this time, I'm not going to list each number of hours. I'm going to list them in intervals that are equal. My first interval that I'm going to use is 1 to 3. And if you look here, I can count up my tallies and see there are 15 people who watch TV between 1 and 3 hours. Now, since I used 3 data choices and their frequencies, I have to always use 3 data choices per interval. Therefore, that means my next interval is going to be 4 to 6 because there is 1, 2, 3 categories in this interval. Again, I'm going to count up the number of tallies and find that it's 17. My last interval has to be the same size or have the same number of categories as the first 2. So since the first 2 have 3 categories in them, my last interval has to have 3 categories, 7, 8, and 9. Again, I'm going to count up the number of tallies and find that there are 17. Now, once I've created this frequency table, the rest is pretty easy. It's just like making a bar graph. I'm going to use just this frequency table for step 2. I'm going to choose an appropriate scale and interval for the vertical axis. Remember, we talked about if I'm going to go up more than 1 on the vertical axis, I need to go up by that amount every time. I could draw my histogram 17 spaces high, but that would take a lot of time and space. So I'm going to choose to go by 4s. Now, be careful because the intervals are equal, so all bars need to have the same width. Not doing so can make your graph look misleading. So now I've already got my bars. I'm going to draw a bar graph for each interval. The height of the bar represents the frequency for that interval, and the bars must touch but not overlap. So here is 1 to 3 hours. The frequency was 15, so I make my first bar so that it shows a frequency of 15. My second bar, 4 to 6 hours, has a frequency of 17, and so does my 7 to 9 hour interval. With all graphs, a histogram must also be labeled. So I'm going to label the axes and the intervals, and finally give my graph a title. Let's look at this table below. It's going to show the number of hats a group of students own. We're going to make a histogram of this data. We begin by making a frequency table of the data, keeping in mind that the intervals must be equal. So I'm going to choose to use intervals of 3 again, because that's a really good number to divide the number of data items collected, or categories collected. It's an easy way to divide it. So 1 to 3 has a frequency of 12. 4 to 6 hats owned has a frequency of 18, and 7 to 9 hats owned has a frequency of 24. Step 2 is to choose an appropriate scale and interval for the vertical axis. The greatest value on the scale should be at least the greatest frequency, 24. I chose to go by 5s, and I went up to 30. I could have stopped at 25 though. Next, I'm going to draw a bar graph for each interval. The height of the bar is the frequency of that interval, and keep in mind that the bars must touch but not overlap, and be about the same width, or very close to it. if you'll see, after I label my axes and my intervals, you will see that the height of each bar matches the frequency. So, for 1 to 3 hats owned, the bar goes to 12. 4 to 6 hats owned, bar goes to 18. 7 to 9 hats owned goes to 24. Please note that there is a title and the axes are labeled. You might have also noticed that on a histogram, the vertical axis, or the y-axis, is always labeled frequency, because a histogram is just another frequency display. Now it's your turn. The list shows the number of laps students ran one day. You're going to make a histogram of this data. Go ahead and pause the video and create your histogram. We are done with this lesson, so don't forget to WSQ in your notes.